Hello everyone. Bailey here. I am quite excited to be back in the studio today to announce not only the 300th episode of Data Driven, but also the premiere episode of Season 6. In this episode, Frank and Andy interview Rupesh Malpani, whom Frank often refers to as the next Steve Jobs. Listen to this interesting conversation to find out why. But before that, I want to sincerely thank you, our listeners, for keeping the faith in us over these last 5 years. I know that I only joined the team in Season 4 and that's when things really got brilliant. Not to confuse correlation and causation, but I just thought I would bring it up. Enough of me banging on about myself. Here is our chat with Rupesh.
All right, hello and welcome back to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. My name is Frank Lavinia, and I'm your host, along with Andy Leonard. So with me on this epic, it's been so long since we recorded, I actually forgot the whole
that's okay
information superhighway thing, but that's okay because this is Season 6, show number 300. How you doing, Andy?
You know, Frank, I'm a little under the weather. I am not sure why. I've got a pretty good guess, and maybe you do too. But other than that, I'm doing okay.
That's good.
How about you, Frank?
If you see me reaching for the water, it's because I grabbed when I was brushing my teeth this morning, I grabbed anti-itch cream instead of toothpaste, which is something that only I thought would happen in like TV, but no, happened to me. I looked it up online. You wash them out. I'm not going to die. I might get like super thirsty, which I am, and I have this huge. If you're watching the video, I have this huge cup here.
So I have to ask you, Frank, do your teeth itch?
They don't anymore. They weren't before. So I looked it up. I won't die. Like I was rinsing my mouth out for 5 minutes and taste out, but be careful, folks. Be careful, folks. So for those that don't know, I've kind of mentioned this on live feeds and a couple of data points here and here. I moved. And if you're watching, I'm in the new house. I moved probably about an hour north of where I used to live. So I guess technically I'm in the Baltimore suburbs. But I still consider myself living in the DC area. We didn't really plan on moving. It was kind of like one of those things where it just kind of happened, almost if it was divinely inspired. I don't know. That's not for me to say, but we bought a house. We got a house in this crazy market. We're working on selling the old house. So I'm happy about that. But I'm super happy to do it. I'm sorry, what?
Your setup does look different.
Yeah, it's all fancy now. So I'm excited today for show 300 and this kickoff of season 6 to have Rupesh Malpani, who I like to call him on a lot of my live feeds. If you've seen my live feeds, you probably have seen him comment a lot. But I like to call him as kind of the next Steve Jobs because he does some amazing things. He's very innovative type of guy. And I think he had me on his podcast about a year ago with Alberto. And I forget Alberto's last name. Alberto Rodan?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So welcome to the show. We finally have you on. How's it going?
Hi, guys. Looking forward to talking to you all.
Cool.
I'm kind of psyched, because like we're going to talk about metaverse, AI, and whatnot.
Sure, we can talk about whatever you want because I know you've done some interesting things. Although your video is frozen, and it's been one of those things. It's been one of those technical glitches. You caught up. You're good.
Yeah, come on. We're talking across the globe. This is bound to happen.
That's right. You're based in India, and I believe it's is it Pune or Pune?
It is Pune.
Pune. Okay. So neither. So got it. And I believe that's where Satya Nadella is from, if memory serves. I think he's from that area.
No, he's from Hyderabad, I guess. He's
so
from a different state.
Okay. Somebody told me he was from Pune, but they were probably pulling my leg.
I don't know.
So you have a number of entrepreneurial activities going on. So first is Pixi.
Yes. So Pixi is a product which we are building at Pick. It is basically a machine learning dataset camera tool. Very easy to make datasets on Android. Like you can completely learn and try machine learning without having to code a single line script using Pixi and Microsoft Lobe. You just make data sets, download them into Lobe, and Lobe processes it. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. So when we first met, you were doing something with the shopping carts that are common across India. Are you still doing that, or what?
Yes. So Pixi is one of the interfaces we are building for that. So like essentially we are building a robotic kiosk of sorts, which would have a AI helper in that kiosk.
Interesting.
Because from what I have seen, we tend to use AI for only smart people know how to utilize AI well, and like smart people here, I mean people who are good with tech. People who aren't have to kind of, how do I say this? It's tough for them. So we are building an easier way for them to use tech, in which we are going to build an IoT solution. There is going to be a machine learning solution which would help them manage their business, and trying to kind of build it decentralized without using traditional blockchain. So let's see.
Interesting. Because it's one of those things where when you showed me your original pitch deck almost a year ago, I was like, wow, this guy's thinking like big. And there's a lot of these carts in India. So for those not familiar with this type of form of commerce, you were telling me about it. Like, so a lot of villages and stuff, they have they're like carts where you can buy
Not just
soda.
villages, Frank. So like
What?
it's like a hot dog stand in New York.
Okay. Got it.
Like a kiosk model for business where a lot of FMCG goods are sold.
Mhm.
So it is having literally a store on every cross section.
Nice.
That's kind of the goal.
Very cool. And I think you're right. A lot of these folks there that operate these stores, they're not going to be AI or data scientist type people. And to have tools for them to be able to use it um, in a low code, no code kind of way is very cool.
Low code, no code is far. Here the problem is these guys have to get to a diary first.
Interesting.
Like right now, these guys use chits of paper across every day, which they end up using, and they have all the daily invoicing and daily accounting on that, and that chit of paper just gets lost.
Right.
It's that bad.
Well, you mentioned that you're looking for an alternative to blockchain, or how are you solving that problem?
So I meant blockchain with respect to systems architecture, not the crypto framework of fintech. Like the nature of design, decentralized, where we don't collect user data, but which can help you shop and sell stuff using an AI, essentially on which we don't collect user data. We kind of educate our users to collect the data and process it. So it's kind of like building an AI on every phone, and the user is going to build pieces of it by themselves, and we are just shipping a Lego block framework.
Gotcha.
For now.
Interesting.
So, and to even make this more fun, kind of thinking to add holograms to the mix,
Yeah, you were telling me something. So we spoke, I think, last week, and that was just about when we're also reworking our calendaring system, because our calendaring system has been a challenge, because for a while I was at this house and the old house, and long story short, we our calendaring system wasn't working right, because I'm a pretty busy guy now at Red Hat, and Andy's pretty busy. So we switched to Microsoft Booking. So I was troubleshooting that, and then he's like, we were talking. Somehow we were chatting on LinkedIn or Instagram, and you're like, "Oh no, holograms are super easy." I'm like, okay, that's news to me." And then you showed me something you had done with a like a 4,000 lumen projector or something like that.
I have that projector right there, like I kept it for the podcast because we were going to talk about this. I knew that. So
Cool.
like it was not even a 4000 lumens projector. I tried that out on a 3000 lumen projector and I found a 4000 lumen projector would be better. That's why I suggested that to Frank.
That's cool. That's cool. It's he showed me like a demo video that he did. It is interesting. And I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of talk about metaverse. Andy and I are in the early stages of launching a third podcast on metaverse and kind of all things Web 3.0. But I think regardless of what Web 3.0 is going to look like or have or be constitute, data is going to be a big part of that, and AI is going to be a big part of that. So I think that data has become from. I was on a call literally just before this recording, where data historically has been one of those things where businesses had to collect for transactional reasons, for regulatory reasons, all sorts of reasons. But over the last decade or so, they realize that there's value there, and that the value is increasing in terms of the amount of data that we can collect. And if you're not, I see poor Andy is like coughing because if you're not watching the video,
I hope
thank
he
you,
gets well
Andy.
soon.
I hope he gets better too. But I do appreciate that, the show must go on, right? No, and a lot of people, they ask me, because if you look at my LinkedIn description, it says something about a quantum developer, AI engineer, an aspiring quantum developer trying to make his way in the metaverse. And they're like, well, you're tying a lot of buzzwords there. And yes, I am. But these buzzwords are connected. I do feel that this is a grand unified theory, if you will, of kind of what the future of commerce is going to be. Are we always going to be in Oculus Rift type devices? No. But, are we going to be doing more and more virtually and online? Yeah. I mean, we kind of learned the last 2 years how important that is. I mean, we're complaining. Think about this, like from kind of a historical perspective. We're complaining about blocky video and sometimes dropping your video a few frames. You're in India, and Andy and I are in the East Coast of the US. And, I'm outside Baltimore and Andy's in Farmville, like not the video game, but like I always have to get that in. So it's really, I think, one of those things where we take this for granted. And what's that going to look like 10 years from now? Right? What's that going to look like? What did it look like 10 years ago? We probably could have had this conversation 10 years ago. It might have been choppier, it might have been audio only, but it could have been possible. What's it going to look like 10 years from now? Are we going to be able to, shake hands virtually? Are we going to be able to like look around at the same space? I don't know. I know that just seeing my kids as they grow up, my older son, his big innovation was the iPad, right? And the luxury was having the hotspot on in the car when we drove places, right? Because we charged a lot of money back then. My younger son, for him, he's always grown up around an Alexa device. So he would and Siri, right? So he before he could learn how to spell, he would use Siri to type messages into the chat.
That's awesome.
It is awesome because, like, for me growing up, my a lot of people in my family were immigrants to the U.S. and for them, just having a TV was like, whoa, right? And I would complain that it wasn't a color TV, right? It was a black and white TV, and they would be like, when I was your age, we didn't have a TV, and like, now when we drive somewhere and there's no good cell phone service, they complain like, oh no, the cell phone service is out. And I'm like, really, like, this is, yeah. So it's just funny. And like, I've been rambling on, but ultimately I see this as all connected in one way or the form. Because one of the things that I read, and I don't know how true this is, but apparently one of the things that the Oculus does is when it maps out the room, some of that data goes back to Mark Zuckerberg organization, which I find a little creepy. But one of the other things that I heard was that if you're in the metaverse, and you tilt your head to look at an ad for something, that how long you look at that is measured and tracked. It's just going to be another vector for collecting mass quantities of data.
And I hate that.
I hate that too. It's a little creepy. But and a lot of things in AI, it borders that line between that's really cool and that's really creepy. There is a lot.
I don't know about 10 years from now what we could see about metaverse, but we could be having a Zoom call or a Teams call or a call like this on holograms even today.
Right. It would, it's one of those things where the technology, the true cutting edge, is always about 10 years away from it being productized and made easy, right? If each one of us got a projector and we set things up, we probably could have a holographic conversation, but it would require
less than $4,000-$5,000.
A lot of money too. Money always helps.
No, but how do I say this? The problem in the holograms is not the setup. It is the video rendering, which makes it look like a hologram.
Interesting.
And that is where we don't see a lot of holograms happening, because no one just wants to make that effort to make it, including myself. I'm guilty of it too.
That's cool. So your app is called Pixi, and I've used it because it's really cool. So if you've done any kind of computer vision work, you have to collect a lot of data. And there's a joke that we have, Andy and I have had. We've had other guests. They're mostly in the AI space, not the data engineering side. Well, they'll say, well, first we got the data. And in those 5 words, first we got the data, right? That's 6 months of work in minimum, right? Sometimes more, right? And probably usually more. I see Andy nodding. But, for AI folks, like the data is almost secondary, and the data collection, and it's in the data collection and the data labeling that things like bias can creep in, all these things you don't want, or just errors can creep in. So what's really cool about Pixi is that you can capture on your phone, which pretty much everybody has to some degree, and it captures a bunch of data. So if you were one of these vendors, these hot dog cart type things, you can take pictures of things that you probably would do with your phone, and then you would be able to upload that through this startup called Lobe.ai, which Microsoft bought. And it's a really cool thing, because what you've done basically is you made this app that makes data collection for pictures much easier.
And there's one more thing, okay? You both work technically in machine learning, so probably you would understand why this is important, but any other user wouldn't. Pixi, on Pixi, we click pictures directly on raw format on the stock camera. So what happens in that is the picture quality is different and it is filterless. So the error we see on our machine learning models, which comes through clicking through normal phone camera, that is a processed image. That processed image is equal to error.
Right.
So we have kind of tried to iron that out.
Right, but I mean, it's cool because you've bootstrapped this, you've done this, you have another business, you work with building LinkedIn.
Yes, we also
pages.
so that's how we are bootstrapping. We have a marketing agency which funds all the software and all the tech experiments, innovations I want to do, but we make our bread and butter with doing marketing.
That's cool. So shameless plug for you. I know you have some amazing metrics to share. But yeah, if you're looking to grow your LinkedIn or your social media presence, you've done some amazing things I've seen.
So this is the feedback I got today from a client. Out of the 200 new leads they got, 95 or 98 went to their website. That's more than 45% conversion. And they were shocked seeing that much.
Nice.
That is at least 4 times of whatever the basic gold standard is.
Nice. That's awesome. That's worth shouting from the rooftops. That's for sure. So we'll definitely make sure your contact information is in the show notes, so if folks want to connect with you. That's why I say like
And I shamelessly wrote them on the board also.
Shamelessly write it on the board. That's cool. So do you have any more questions, Andy, or do you want to go to the second half of the show?
No, let's jump into the second half, Frank.
All right, I'll kick it off. How did you find your way into data, and did data find you, or did you find data? Like, how did you get started in the technology kind of space?
So I've been kinda good with tech since I'm a kid. Like I've had an email ID since I'm in grade 1. So that's like 5, 6, 7 years old, something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I was in the computer club in our school. We learned a lot. So by fifth grade, sixth grade, we knew how to write HTML code. We knew how to work on Visual Basics. We knew how to write programs on QBasic. We knew how to write programs on that old language. You know, there's this old language called Logo.
Logo.
I haven't even heard of it today.
That had the thing with the turtle. They called it the turtle. You moved it around the screen. Is that, yeah.
And
that was big when I was a kid, but we didn't have computer. We didn't have that with computer classes when I was a kid.
So like, it was completely writing a 200, 300 page document to make a graphic on that program. So every pixel was mapped, and we had to give command for every pixel movement. That was fun.
I never used it, but I remember seeing like news stories from like, you know, the wealthier parts of New York City schools. Like they had computer classes, and they would show like, hey, and the kid would be like, this is called the turtle, and you move it around by doing this. And it's like, that was pretty cool.
Then 8th, 9th grade was JavaScript, and I was kind of by 10th standard, till the time I got out of the school, I was the best computer club student also. So I remember this one day, okay? So there's this one teacher, I'm not going to name her. She was waiting in the class before we all students got to the school. She was waiting just because there's something in the lab which wasn't working, and the whole system had crapped out. She's like, Rupesh, let's go. We have to fix it.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So that's very cool when you get to be tech support at that age.
It was really fun, you know, and even by then we used to have juniors from school with whom every Saturday we used to go learn programming, teach them programming, answer each other's questions, work on projects, because the computer club had students from 5th grade to 10th grade. That's like, let's say, 10-year-olds to 16, 17-year-olds, roughly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And after that, I kind of got into high school for 11th and 12th grade, and where my majors was comm science. But after learning that, I realized that the colleges which I had around me, I was already working on that. Like I had already written programs complex as projects which they teach in colleges. So it did not make sense for me to get a graduation degree in comm science, because I thought my pace of learning was kind of better than what I'd learned. So I jumped into business administration. Once I started working in sales, after a point, you know, I've had a job since grade 11. Like when I was learning comm science, I was also selling computers at one of uncle's stores. So it was fun.
Do you know who else did that? Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Oh, dang. Come on.
There might be parts of Steve Jobs' life you might want to skip, but you know,
you're in good company, that's for sure. You, Rupesh.
No, you're a smart guy.
So our next question.
Through the next 7-8 years. I'll just skip through the next 7-8 years in a very quick thing to answer the question on if data found me or I found data. So first job, selling computers. Second job, selling solar panels. While selling solar panels, I had an e-commerce store on which we sold clothes. Then I joined an app team which was into meetups applications. Like offline meetups, we go out with friends, we have those IOUs and whatnot, and then we plan a location, we plan the travel. So they had built a platform just for managing that. After that, I joined a lead generation data company, furniture, selling fish, selling advertising services, to now selling software and marketing. So in all of this, the programmer brain in me kind of just picked up on data, and like that's how it went.
That's cool.
That is very good. Well, what would you say is your favorite part of your current job?
See, it is kind of both the opportunities I have and I can try. Write, writing, like just trying to troll Elon Musk on Twitter all day. From that part to giving 20 hours, 18 hours a day to work to figure out marketing for other companies, to figure out how to build our software, to find skills, to kind of scout people on which. See, I'm a dropout. I did not finish my business degree.
Okay.
Because I was like in the second year of college, I walked into college with a visiting card. So it kind of was moot. And in all of that, what happens is, like, I like going to meetings. I like to I have a bug to solve marketing issues through technology and working in different types of industries and trying to help solve those business problems is what keeps me going. So
Cool.
at PIC, we are solving that one native business problem, which is the kiosk ecosystem.
Right.
And while we're doing that, we're getting to a point we build other software to develop software development, no code, low code.
Interesting.
Very nice.
So, and it is this one product, So we are starting we are in design for a product which is called Flowpix. I'm sure both of you guys learned programming, drawing flowcharts first, and then deciding what code goes in the compiler and not
Kind of.
using GitHub, right?
Not at
Kind of.
all.
Kind of. Like I remember my first day in comp sci class in university. So I learned programming because I got a Commodore 64 and to play video games on. And then basically it became this. I went to my parents like, hey, can I have video games to buy for this? And he's like, my dad was kind of like laughed, and then my mom's like, well, it's like my dad laughed. He's like, dude, we just spent how much money on this thing? And then my mom turned and said, well, why don't you write your own games? And I don't think she realized like the chain effect of that is where I am now, which was basically, because the Commodore 64, they were brilliant in the sense that it shipped with this book, the Commodore 64 Programmer's Guide or something like that. And it was a spiral brown book written, I think I might have been like 6th grade. So I might have been like 11 or 12. And it was not written for your average 11 or 12-year-old. So I'm reading words like parameters, and I'm like, what does that mean? This is before Google. So like, got dictionary. What's parameter? Okay. And then like, kind of like, that's basically how I learned programming. When I formally was introduced to flowcharts, I'm like, I get where they're going with this, but this is really annoying. I don't know what your experience is when you first saw flowchart, Andy, but that was my first thought.
Yeah, I had I kind of came at it a couple different directions. At first was computing and as a hobby. And like I was about the same age as you, Frank, but it was about 10 years earlier because we're about 10 years older than you. But when I started, we didn't have persistent storage at all. So when you turned the power off, you lost everything. And we
You didn't have
would
cassette
use
tapes?
not initially. not initially.
Okay.
We did eventually. We upgraded to cassettes for still persistent storage. But we did, we would type in hexadecimal, usually from Byte magazine,
Yes.
and we type for maybe 30 minutes and we'd get 1K basic. And then if we'd done all of that right, typed all those bytes right, then we could execute 1K basic and then start writing, line number basic programs. But when I saw
Wow.
flowcharts, I first encountered them a couple of years later when I was in algebra class. And I immediately caught, the connection. I was like, this is a way of kind of formalizing what we do. But by that time, I had coded so much that my way of thinking about it wasn't better, hands down, but it was different and I was familiar with it. And that was enough for me to look at it and go, I'll do this in class, but it's not going to work. Interestingly enough, it came back. I became an electrician years later, and we had programmable logic controllers, PLCs, and the language I learned to program them in was called ladder logic, and it's back from before computers. It's all about relays.
Yes.
This circuit energizes and this circuit closes and that one opens, and it is logic, but it is, and it effectively, those contacts in the relay are bits. And I kind of circled back to flowcharts because it made more sense at that time to do so. So it's very interesting, kind of my experience with that. And Rupesh, I'd love to learn more about how you feel about flowcharts since you introduced this topic and me and Frank took off down the rabbit trails.
No, that's fine. Like, the thing is, you guys kind of helped build the concept of flowchart from whatever I hear, because that time, from what I remember learning, those times the graphic user interface did not exist. DOS did not exist. So you kind of wrote code in 8-bit. That is mind-blowing.
Well, it was all we had, when I started out. I joke and say that we used to carve our own chips out of wood. It wasn't quite that bad, but it was close. Compared to today,
Oh yeah.
I am living in the future. We couldn't even imagine, Frank or I.
I mean, when I was a kid, when I was in high school, the Star Trek: The Next Generation came out, and Star Trek was on before I was born. So my dad used to watch. We used to watch reruns, and they'd have the computer. You could talk to the computer, and that was science fiction. Now I have an Alexa all over my house. I used to have a Cortana, but that's another story. But it's like one of those things where
It knows
something I
me.
take for granted. Well, yeah, and I know if you ask Google Assistant who you are, like, you get this whole like really cool description of you.
Yes, it knows me.
It knows you. It doesn't. It's funny because sometimes if I it's weird. Like if you do the search, we were trying this the other day, and I guess it didn't. My New York accent kept like missing like your last name, like messing up your last name, and it was like it's not working. But no, I mean it's it's one of those things where one of our previous guests, Mark Tabadillo, he coined the term digital native versus digital immigrant, right? So for people over a certain age, we are immigrants to this space, whereas people who grew up around the internet and all this technology, they are natives. My younger son will probably never remember a time without Siri or Alexa. And my older son does remember
They grew
that.
up in Star Trek.
What?
They grew up in Star Trek.
Right, they grew like for them. So
Exactly.
when they watch like an old episode of Star Trek, aside from pointing out how goofy the effects look now, the whole idea of talking to computer is not futuristic, right? Maybe what is futuristic is kind of the nuance that the computer can pick up on, because we're still not there yet. But it's a quantum difference, if you will, like between like, wow, you can talk to a computer. And like there was a scene in the original, one of the original movies was the ones with the whales, where Scotty the engineer sits down in front of the computer, starts talking to it. And this was like mid 80s, and the guy, like, people were like looking at him like he's crazy. He goes, "Oh no, yeah," and he points at the mouse, like, "No, you got to use this." And he picks up the mouse and says, "Hello, computer." Like,
Oh, dang.
it's like, it's just funny. Like,
Now that you think of it, that's the best place to hide a mic.
it is
It
actually.
is. Yeah. Yep.
I
And the
think that was
best
in
for
burn
gamers to
notice.
have a push to talk also.
Now,
Also, yeah.
so
So,
let's move
yes,
on.
would you agree or disagree? Logic or code? What is more important?
I'd
It's like a
I'd
chicken
call
or the
that
egg.
equal. I
Yeah,
would
I was
call
gonna
it
say.
equal. Yeah.
I would say logic is the base thing, but code is how you achieve it.
See, no disagreement there. My point being, like, you can figure out how to code, but you cannot figure out how to build good logic.
That's true.
That's a
That
fair
is
point.
true. Well, I mean,
Right?
that's all these things they talk about learn to code, right? Like when I was a kid, coding was not encouraged, right? Because it was not seen as it was just not a thing, and it wasn't seen as
Oh, that
important
was an
to kids.
alien thing then.
It was an alien thing then, and
Really was. Yeah.
uh, and there's various people have said everybody should learn how to code, and I disagree. I think everyone should try coding because it may not be for you, right? It may not be your cup of tea, but you should at least know about it, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about thinking through a process. What problem are you trying to solve? How would you take that
Logic
big
building.
problem and put it into smaller
Exactly.
bits of problem, right? And how do you piece those together? That's really the value in it, right? That's the hard part of coding, like knowing the syntax around JavaScript or C# or Python. That's not hard. I can get like a one sheet cheat sheet and like, if you want to do this, do this. But like thinking through a problem and being skilled at that is what makes you an engineer, I think.
And that is what building a flowchart is, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, in a way,
But the
like this
problem with
process
flowcharts
is
is
graphical
that you
representation is flowchart.
if you put a flowchart together, though, the problem is that you can't execute on the flowchart. You do all the
So
work,
that's the thing, right? That's
but
what we're building. You can use that
Nice.
flowchart to build software.
interesting.
Okay. Now that gives it a different twist, I would say,
That gives it a
because
purpose.
yeah, between when I try to categorize, logic flowcharts and thinking through the problem you're trying to solve with actual writing code to execute what you've thought of, to me, it's in that same, I don't know, that same comparative space as strategy and tactical. You have to have a strategy. Well, that's not true. You don't have to. And some people get very lucky just sticking with tactical. But most often, it's better to have a strategy and then begin executing tactically against that strategy. So that's an awesome idea, Rupesh. I can't wait to see what you guys build.
Yeah,
I
same here.
kind of would need your help also. So I'd use this episode to shout out to other engineers also.
Well, there you go.
Awesome.
There's a lot of engineers listen to this, so we'll make sure
That is
that.
so true.
Which
I'm
leads me
kind of out
to
of my depth here.
one of our questions. Where can people learn more about you and what you're up to?
I tweet a lot. I write a lot on LinkedIn, and I post very often on Instagram.
Okay.
So,
What's
like,
your
I have
Instagram handle?
it is Rupesh Malpani across all the platforms.
Okay.
Thanks. That's
And
good
if you
to
have a
hear.
Google Assistant, you can ask.
What is Rupesh Malpani good at?
There you go.
Do you have one?
I don't have. I have it on my
Yeah,
phone.
Andy. I thought Andy was
Yeah.
checking one out.
No, I talked him into getting an Alexa, I think, at some point.
Ah, come on.
Maybe I'll get another one. I don't know. But so do you
That's
listen to audiobooks? I'm curious.
not really, not much.
Not really.
Conversations, yes. Audiobooks, less.
Got it. So is there any book you would recommend? Because this is for our sponsors.
I would say $100 startup.
$100 startup. Cool.
Yes,
Okay.
it is
I will
written
check that
by
out.
some guy called Christopher. I don't remember his last name, but yeah, like I have it right there. I was just
I
gonna
will
go
check
check
it out. I will check it out. So Audible is a sponsor of the show. And if you go to thedatadrivenbook.com,
Uh-huh.
you can check it out. You'll get one free audiobook on us. and we'll get a little bit of a tip of the hat and enough to buy a Starbucks coffee if you decide to subscribe. Andy and I are both heavy Audible listeners. I know that I just listened to Grant Cardone's The 10X Mentor the second time, and it's an awesome book. I recommend that. How about you, Andy?
I'm still trying to get through the start of the Grant Cardone 10X Mentor the first time, Frank. I'm not even halfway through that. I did look up the $100 startup, and I see I'm going to mispronounce the last name, but that's not uncommon for me. It's Chris Guillebeau. I'm not sure. Guillebeau.
Oh, sounds like a French name.
Chris Gullible.
It does, but that's a
funny.
great looking book.
That's
And I've
cool.
done a lot of bootstrapping myself as a serial entrepreneur. And
for anyone listening who is offended, hold on, by the fact
Go
that I
ahead.
made fun of somebody with a French last name, they should be reminded that Lavinia or Levine is a French last name. And trust me, my name gets butchered all the time. And in fact, technically, I butcher my own last name because it is pronounced Levine. And I go with Lavinia. And you're probably wondering, why is that? Well, the reason is historical. When my grandfather immigrated to the U.S., during the Great Depression, he moved to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, or somewhere in Brooklyn, and he didn't speak much English, or if any, but he could kind of understand Italian. Not a lot of francophones, or French-speaking people in Brooklyn in the 1930s. Who knew? And everyone just assumed he was Italian. So the Italian pronunciation for vineyard is Lavinia, and he just went with it. So it kind of stuck. Although one of my kids correct me now because my older kid's taking
French classes.
taking French, and he's like, no, it's Lavigne. I was like, well, I use Lavinia. It's kind of one of those historical
Right.
mistakes that kind of stuck.
That's those kinds of things happen, and I think I admire your approach to it. Pick one that works for you, and
Right.
just roll with it. And if it bothers somebody, then I don't know. If I worried about everybody that was bothered by something I said, Frank, I'd be worried all the time. And I'm not trying to say that it doesn't matter. It does, but it's like I can't change what's in your head. So anyway,
All right. So it looks like
Mr.
it would be
Chris.
Guillebeau.
Mr. Chris, yeah, $100 startup. That's an interesting looking book. I don't think I've read it. It's not. I went to Amazon and it doesn't show that I picked it up before, but that's the kind of book I like reading those types of books. There's always some gem. Frank taught me this. There's always some gem in every book, and Frank reads like 1 million books a year, so he would know. And he says, some books are just trash except for this one sentence, and others are just, they're filled with those sentences. So
and some books, I mean, some books, there's actually an Audible version of this book, so I'm going to pick it up.
Okay. Yeah.
TheDataDrivenBook.com.
For
this book?
Yeah, for the $100 startup. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's nice.
That one.
I like audiobooks because I can learn while I'm in the car.
Mm-hmm.
I can be doing something else, gardening or moving furniture, or putting stuff in boxes, taking stuff out of boxes, all the moving
Crazy
stuff.
Crazy
talk. I never moved with kids before, and that's quite an experience.
It seems like book coming to life, the book narrating itself.
Yes, especially if the author reads their own stuff. It is no disrespect to voice actors out there, but there's nothing like hearing somebody who wrote the words kind of adding their own color and flourish and emphasis. Grant Cardone is probably the poster child for this, right? As is Jordan Belfort, like like the Wolf of Wall Street. When he says it, like and the way he talks like a lot. He's from New York and from the same part of New York my mom's family's from. So like I have members of my family that sound exactly like Jordan Belfort. They'll be like, profanity and all. So
I'm with you on the voice actors. I like them in the fiction, but I rarely have time to listen to fiction audio. Mostly I read the hardcovers, but yes, I can't tell you how many times you'll be listening to the author reading the book, and they'll get to a spot and say, hey, yeah, when I wrote this, I was kind of thinking about this way, but here's a bonus, it's like this. And it's all across the board. And it's so cool. It adds value to the audiobook, makes it worth the time. And I'm just like Frank, I garden and, I don't travel as much as I used to. I'm about to start traveling. Frank, I'm doing my first in-person event in over 2.5 years in October. Yeah. So, which means I have to get well before October.
You have to get well and prove that you're well and all
and
that.
prove it exactly.
So,
but it'll happen.
Well, cool.
Rupesh, it was great having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time. And I know, because I've been to India, that it's a crazy time of day, night, really, over there. Thank you for either getting up early or staying up late with us, or whatever you had to do to accommodate us. That's very kind. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say,
pleasure to be here and talk to two geniuses.
Oh, well, thank you. Andy has a green screen. We'll add 2 computer generated geniuses behind him.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, you're good with the graphics.
Maybe a hologram. I don't know.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. We know you're busy and we appreciate you listening to our podcast. But we have a favor to ask. Please rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you subscribe to us. You have subscribed to us, haven't you? Having high ratings and reviews helps us improve the quality of our show and rank us more favorably with the search algorithms. That means more people listen to us, spreading the joy. And, can't the world use a little more joy these days? Now, go do your part to make the world just a little better and be sure to rate and review the show.